Hi, welcome to the August 2018 Founders Live. My name is Michaela Kiner.
And I'm Hanako Ulmer.
And today we'll be talking about how you can build an inclusive, healthy culture within your startup. So Hanako, a question that I get asked a lot from entrepreneurs and founders is, when should they start thinking about diversity and inclusion?
I think it's never too early to start, especially if you're starting off with a small company, and as you start gaining a lot more people onto your team, you don't want to play catch up. And so I think that from the beginning, you should already be providing an inclusive culture, a way to support different diverse candidates. As we talked earlier, we were talking about how you might have a company of 10, and then in a couple months it might be a company of 20 people. Those other 10 people might be a complete diverse pool that you've never had to experience or work with before. So I think the earlier the better to just start going.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And one of the funnier stories I heard was a colleague who said, hey, we've just sort of accidentally built up a 25-person all-male sales team, and we're about to hire our first woman, and there was a group of HR professionals, and she said, what's your advice? And we all kind of laughed and said, hire two. But it also wasn't a joke, because how do you integrate a single female, and then she has to kind of take on that burden of she's now the voice of all women, which is kind of difficult and unfair to her.
Another thing that I used to have conversations with is an example of paternity leave and maternity leave. Will you also be providing that for those people who are planning on adoption? Like, will you also provide them with adoption leave, right? So I think it's one of those concepts of trying to figure out the different candidates that you might be drawing in and how to support them and already have those in place. It's better to have a system in place and not get any candidates rather than having those diverse candidates and not having any support in place.
I think too that goes to the quote of our very sage advisor, Cheryl Ingram, who says diversity is about representation, but inclusion is about culture.
Sure, exactly. So something that I run into a lot is the idea of D&I and DEI. So what do you think is important about why we should talk about all three of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah. And this is huge, and probably for those who haven't kind of spent their life in the area of diversity, for decades we've really talked about diversity and inclusion, and that's starting to make a shift to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And really to have kind of a comprehensive plan or strategy, you have to be thoughtful about all three.
Absolutely.
Probably the biggest thing that we're hearing today about equity is trying to understand gaps in gender pay equity in particular. And there was recent research that cited that the number one concern for professional women today is pay equity. Right. There were recent events at the BBC where thousands of women came together after the wages of the highest earners were released, and there were very noteworthy women who were not on that list, or who were on the list but their male peers were making up to twice as much as they were, which led to lawsuits and all kinds of other turmoil within the BBC.
Right, so there's something that I learned was a concept called manels. And it's a panel full of men, and I think that one of the strongest things to bring inclusion into a company is having your allies, right? Those who are going to be the most dominant presence on a company. And if you happen to be a man asked to be on a panel, your first question should be, who else is going to be on the panel with me? And if you don't hear of people of color or of women, it's kind of on you to have that conversation, be like, I would love to be on this panel, but I would like to also see other diverse people up on the panel with me. Because that's another voice that is being spoken for a population that might not have a seat at the table, and it's their way of bringing people onto the table. So it's the term manels kind of cracks me up, but it is very common. But I see a lot of people trying to create inclusion within their company by asking who's not here is one of the first questions. So
that's a great question, and I like your point about the manel, because I think a lot of men are trying to understand what their role is when it comes to inclusion, and what it means to have a type of privilege, especially in the American workforce. And so understanding how you can be an ally and an advocate, and it could be something as small as that question of I want to make sure that there's representation anywhere that I'm personally going to be representing and speaking on behalf of the company.
Right.
Well, that's probably a good segue into the rest of the conversation, and we can
Yeah,
end it there.
absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.